Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're completely rethinking environmental management. For the longest time, the ISO 14001 standard was viewed by a lot of folks as just a checklist, Just a mountain of red tape necessary to keep the regulators off your back. But the new ISO 14001-2026 standard, it flips that script entirely. It's no longer just about dodging fines. It's a strategic catalyst for real, long-term business value. We're going to look at how leading organizations are taking these compliance burdens and turning them into massive opportunities for green innovation.
So I want you to start by asking yourself this exact question. Is your environmental compliance a burden, or is it a blueprint for innovation? Are you stuck in that old reactive mentality where your environmental policy is literally just a dusty binder sitting on a shelf until the auditor shows up? Or are you using proactive environmental management to drive real change, optimize your operations, and gain a serious competitive edge? Today, we're exploring exactly how to move from that dusty binder to a dynamic, value-driven system.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the exact transformational journey we're going to take today. We'll start with the environmental context, define strategic boundaries, integrate the management system, transform risks into opportunities, and finally, map it all out onto a sustainable technology roadmap. Let's get started.
Section 1. The environmental context, establishing the baseline.
Right. So before any actual planning happens, you absolutely have to understand your true environmental reality and what your stakeholders actually expect under clauses 4.1 and 4.2. A generic copy-pasted policy? Yeah, that just won't cut it anymore. And this brings us to clause 4.3, which requires your environmental management system scope to be clearly defined. This scope represents the physical and functional boundaries of your framework. It ensures that your environmental responsibilities are systematically managed, not just treated as administrative paperwork, and tied directly to your strategic direction. If your scope is poorly defined, you're going to end up with massive gaps in compliance and a total misallocation of your resources.
Moving right along to Section 2, defining strategic boundaries, avoiding the artificial scope. The core idea here is that your system's boundaries have to reflect your actual operational influence and your real risks, not just what's convenient for an audit. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference between an artificial scope and a true strategic scope. We see organizations constantly trying to artificially restrict their boundaries. They'll include their administrative offices in the EMS, sure, but conveniently exclude their outsourced distribution fleets or waste management facilities just to make compliance easier. But a strategic scope? That embraces full lifecycle integration. It encompasses all environmentally significant activities that you actually control or influence. Hiding your high-impact operations from auditors might save you some paperwork today, but it exposes you to massive liabilities tomorrow.
Let's make this super concrete. We're going to look at some real-world examples from the source material where unjustified exclusions led to major audit nonconformances. For instance, omitting third-party logistics fleets when you're the one dictating their route planning and fuel efficiency. Major red flag. Excluding a chemical surface coating facility just because it sits under a different internal management structure totally distorts your true risk profile. The exact same goes for ignoring temporary construction sites or bypassing leased cold storage units that suck up massive amounts of energy and use hazardous refrigerants. Bottom line, if you influence the environmental outcome, it absolutely needs to be in your scope.
Section 3. Integrating the management system beyond the environmental department.
So under Clause 4.4, the era of the isolated environmental department handling everything in a vacuum is officially over. Environmental accountability has to be embedded enterprise-wide. It's got to be a core slice of every single business process. Think about it. If you're in procurement, your supplier selection criteria need to include environmental performance. In logistics, it's all about route optimization and emissions. In production, it's waste reduction. And over in finance, it's evaluating capital investments through the lens of lifecycle costs and sustainability. True integration means your environmental system is just how the business operates every single day.
But, none of that enterprise-wide integration actually happens without leadership. Clause 5.1 is uncompromising here. Leadership has to set the tone at the top. Environmental policies can't just be symbolic statements buried on the company website. Executives must ensure that environmental considerations are actively driving strategic decisions, influencing innovation, and shaping product lifecycle planning. If your leadership treats the EMS as just a compliance chore, the rest of the company will for sure do the exact same thing.
Which brings us to the real game changer. Section 4. Transforming risks into opportunities, the innovation catalyst.
Under Clause 6.1, identifying your environmental risks is no longer just about damage control, it's the vital first step toward uncovering massive business opportunities. At the heart of this is risk-based thinking. This is a complete paradigm shift, guys. Instead of waiting for an environmental incident to blow up and then reacting to it, risk-based thinking shifts your whole organization into playing offense. You are actively anticipating challenges and deliberately seeking out ways to reduce your footprint, improve efficiency, and leverage those dynamics for sustainable growth.
Now, what's really interesting here is picturing this in action. I want you to imagine a strategic planning session where environmental compliance regulations are transformed directly into proactive green innovation opportunities. What you're seeing here is literally a standard risk matrix evolving into a sustainable technology roadmap. Look at logistics fuel emissions. Instead of just tracking data to make sure you barely stay under legal limits, you use that data to build the business case for a complete EV fleet transition. Got risks with chemical solvent leakage? You don't just slap better labels on the barrels, you engineer a closed-loop solvent recovery system. And instead of merely monitoring your industrial wastewater to meet discharge permits, you innovate a zero-liquid discharge water recycling program. You flip the burden into a tangible, proactive win.
The contrast here is night and day. On one side, we have reactive compliance, doing the bare minimum to follow the law, scrambling to react to incidents, and viewing the environment purely as a cost center. On the flip side, we have proactive innovation, where you anticipate trends, intentionally exceed regulations, and treat your environmental performance as a clear-cut competitive advantage. So take a quick second to evaluate. Which of these mindsets is currently driving your organization?
Section 5. The Sustainable Technology Roadmap. Planning for Change.
Okay, so we've identified all these brilliant opportunities, but clauses 6.2 and 6.3 demand that we actually translate them into reality through planned change. Clause 6.2 lays out 4 strict requirements for your action plans. Step 1, define exactly what's going to be done. Step 2, determine the resources required. That's money, tech, and people. Step 3, assign clear responsibility. Who owns it? And Step 4, establish your timeline and how progress will be monitored. The absolutely crucial takeaway here, an environmental objective without these 4 defined steps is just an aspiration. It's not a real plan.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a cohesive, multi-year timeline. Year 1 focuses heavily on identifying your risks and understanding the context. Year 2 is all about integrating those systems across your departments and allocating the hard budget. Year 3 is where the rubber meets the road. You actually implement that new green technology. And Year 4 is dedicated to monitoring and driving continual improvement. This roadmap clearly shows how deliberately planning out your changes prevents uncontrolled environmental impacts down the line.
But hey, change is constant, right? And under Clause 6.3, managing that change systematically is an absolute must. Think about it. If you decide to introduce some flashy new automated manufacturing tech or switch over to bio-based materials, you have to go back and revisit your baseline risk assessments. You need to be certain that in your pursuit of one green innovation, you aren't accidentally introducing new, unmanaged hazards that could suddenly lead to regulatory non-compliance.
When you put the whole shebang together, the return on investment for a fully mature ISO 14001-2026 system is frankly undeniable. Sure, you get enhanced regulatory compliance, but you also drastically reduce your operational costs through better efficiency. You build deep, lasting trust with stakeholders and investors, you create proactive climate resilience, and you establish a massive competitive differentiation in your market. Let me repeat that. True integration equals long-term value creation.
And that brings us to the number 1. This is exactly the number of cohesive, integrated enterprise management systems any organization should strive for. Not a siloed environmental department over in one building and a quality department isolated in another. Quality, safety, operations, and environmental management should all flow through one unified organizational heartbeat.
Which leaves us with this final thought. As regulations inevitably tighten, as technologies rapidly evolve, and as our climate reality shifts, when the environmental landscape changes, will your organization proactively adapt to lead the market, or will you just barely comply? The tools are right here in ISO 14001-2026. How you use them is entirely up to you. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks some incredible proactive innovations in your own planning sessions.